The gilded cage, the afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of Blackwood Gallery, catching the dust motes that danced above the polished concrete floors. Celeste Winters sat hunched over her sketchbook in the corner office, her fingers moving carefully across the paper as she outlined the delicate curves of a pendant design. The silver bracelet on her wrist, one of her own creations, caught the light briefly before she tucked her arm closer to her body, a habit she'd developed over the past 2 years. "Still playing with those little trinkets, I see." Marcus Blackwood's voice cut through her concentration like a blade. He stood in the doorway, his perfectly tailored suit and slicked back hair giving him the appearance of someone far more successful than he actually was. The gallery, despite its impressive facade, barely broke even most months. Though Marcus would never admit that to anyone, Celeste looked up from her sketch, forcing a smile. "Just working on some new pieces?" "I thought maybe Celeste, darling. We've talked about this." Marcus crossed the room and plucked the sketchbook from her hands, studying her drawings with the same expression he might reserve for a child's finger painting. "These little hobby projects of yours are charming, really, but you need to focus on reality. And the gallery needs someone who understands real art, not someone making jewelry for teenage girls." The words stung, just as they always did, but Celeste had learned not to flinch visibly. She'd been working part-time at the gallery for almost as long as she'd been dating Marcus, handling administrative tasks and occasionally helping with installations. Her real passion, her jewelry design, had been relegated to stolen moments. And late nights in her cramped apartment, "I've been getting some interest from local boutiques," she said quietly, reaching for her sketchbook. "Maybe if I could just show you the portfolio I've been working on," Marcus laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "Interest from local boutiques? Celeste, you can't be serious. Do you know what kind of artists I represent? What kind of circles we move in? You think your little wire-wrapped stones are going to fit into that world?" He tossed the sketchbook back onto the desk, and several loose sketches fluttered to the floor. Celeste knelt to gather them, her cheeks burning with embarrassment and frustration. She'd shown him her work dozens of times over the past 2 years, and his response was always the same: dismissive, condescending, designed to make her feel small. "Look, I'm not trying to be cruel," Marcus continued, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I'm trying to protect you from disappointment. You're good at what you do here, organizing, managing schedules, dealing with the mundane details that keep this place running. Why risk all that chasing some impossible dream?" That evening, they attended the opening of a new exhibition at a competing gallery across town. Marcus had insisted they go, claiming it was important to keep an eye on the competition, though Celeste suspected he simply enjoyed criticizing other people's work. She wore one of her more conservative pieces, a simple silver necklace with a small moonstone, bent on hoping it might go unnoticed. The gallery buzzed with conversation and the gentle clink of wine glasses. Marcus worked the room with practiced ease, name-dropping and networking, while Celeste trailed behind him like an afterthought. She found herself studying the jewelry worn by other attendees, mentally cataloging techniques and design elements. That caught her eye. "And this is Celeste," Marcus said, drawing her into a conversation with a well-dressed couple. "She works for me at the gallery. It is a bit of crafting in her spare time. Nothing too serious, of course." The woman's eyes lit up with interest. "Oh, what kind of crafting?" "I love supporting local artisans." Before Celeste could respond, Marcus let out another of his dismissive laughs. "Just some hobby jewelry. Wire wrapping, beading, that sort of thing. Very ... rustic." He emphasized the last word, as if it left a bad taste in his mouth. Celeste felt something crack inside her chest. Not break, not yet, but definitely crack. She excused herself and spent the rest of the evening in the gallery's restroom, staring at her reflection in the mirror and wondering when she'd become so invisible, even to herself. The drive home was silent except for Marcus's running commentary on the other artists' work and his predictions about which pieces would sell. Celeste stared out the passenger window, her fingers unconsciously twisting the silver bracelet around her wrist. No, tomorrow, she decided, she would start making changes. She just wasn't sure what those changes would look like yet. Forging dreams in fire 6 months after leaving Marcus, Celeste's savings account looked as barren as her former relationship had felt. She'd moved into a cramped studio apartment above a bakery in the arts district, where the smell of fresh bread mixed with the metallic scent of her soldering iron each morning. Her entire jewelry-making operation consisted of a small workbench wedged between her bed and kitchenette. With tools organized in repurposed coffee cans and mason jars, the break from Marcus had been messier than she'd anticipated. He'd fired her from the gallery the day after she'd packed her things, claiming she was emotionally unstable and unprofessional. Word had spread quickly through their social circle, and most of their mutual friends had chosen sides. Sighed naturally. But for the first time in 2 years, Celeste could breathe freely in her own space. Rosa. Martinez found her on a particularly difficult Tuesday morning when Celeste was seriously considering returning to her old corporate job. The older woman appeared at her door like a guardian angel, carrying a toolbox and wearing paint-splattered overalls that somehow looked elegant on her petite frame. "I heard through the grapevine that there's a talented jeweler hiding up here," Rosa said, her slight Mexican accent warming her words. "Mind if I take a look?" Rosa was a legend in the local arts community, master jeweler whose pieces graced museum collections and celebrity red carpets. She'd been creating art for over 30 years, and her workshop in the converted warehouse district was the stuff of dreams. Celeste had admired her work from afar, but never imagined she'd be standing in her tiny apartment, examining her amateur pieces with genuine interest. "You have good instincts," Rosa said, turning one of Celeste's silver pendants toward the light. "But your technique needs work. This soldering joint, see how it's slightly uneven? And your stone setting could be much cleaner." She looked up at Celeste with kind but piercing dark eyes. "Would you like to learn properly?" For the next 4 months, Celeste spent every Tuesday and Thursday evening in Rosa's workshop, learning techniques that transformed her from a hobbyist into a true artisan. Rosa taught her about metal alloys and gemstone properties, about the ancient art of granulation and the modern precision of laser welding, but more importantly, she taught Celeste to trust her own artistic vision. "Marcus was wrong about many things," Rosa said one evening, as they worked side by side, "but he was especially wrong about your potential. You don't make jewelry for teenage girls, you create pieces that tell stories. That's much rarer." The breakthrough came unexpectedly, as breakthroughs often do. James Chen walked into the small boutique where Celeste had finally convinced the owner to display 3 of her pieces. He was a successful architect, with kind eyes and calloused hands, looking for something special for his wife's upcoming birthday. The commercial jewelry stores had left him cold, he explained. He wanted something unique, something that captured his wife's spirit. "She's a pediatric nurse," James told Celeste as they sat in a coffee shop, sketching ideas on napkins. "She lights up any room she enters, but she's also incredibly grounded. Strong but gentle." Does that make sense? It made perfect sense. Celeste designed a necklace that combined warm gold with cool silver, featuring a pendant that looked like a stylized tree with delicate leaves that caught the light when the wearer moved. The centerpiece was a green tourmaline that seemed to glow from within, just like someone who brought healing to children every day. James's reaction when he saw the finished piece was everything Celeste had hoped for. His eyes widened, and he ran his fingers along the chain with the reverence of someone touching something precious. "This is exactly her," he whispered. "How did you know?" But it was his wife's reaction that changed everything. Linda Chen wore the necklace to her hospital's charity gala, where it caught the attention of 3 other attendees who immediately wanted to commission similar pieces. Word spread from there through the medical community, then to Linda's book club, then to her sister, who worked in public relations. By winter, Celeste had a waiting list of 6 weeks and had to invest in better equipment. She converted her bedroom into a proper workshop and slept on a pull-out couch, but she didn't mind. For the first time in her adult life, she fell asleep each night exhausted but fulfilled, her fingers stained with metal polish and her mind already racing toward the next design. Rosa visited one snowy December evening, bringing wine and takeout from the Thai restaurant down the street. They sat on Celeste's floor, eating pad thai from paper containers, while examining her latest creation spread across the coffee table. "You know what I see when I look at these pieces?" Rosa asked, holding up a pair of earrings that resembled tiny galaxies, each one unique, but clearly part of a set. What do you see? I see an artist who's finally free to create what she was meant to create. Rosa smiled and raised her wine glass. Marcus thought he was your ceiling. Turns out he was. Just your floor. That night, after Rosa left, Celeste sat at her workbench with a new piece of silver wire. Letting her hands move without overthinking, she created a ring simple but elegant with tiny stars engraved along the band. It wasn't for a client or for sale. It was just for the joy of making something beautiful, something that hadn't existed in the world until she dreamed it into being. Outside her window, snow began to fall, and the warm light from her workbench lamp created a golden circle. In the darkness, Celeste had never felt less alone. The phoenix rising the call came on a rainy April morning while Celeste was putting the finishing touches on a commission delicate bracelet, inspired by cherry blossoms for a bride's something new. Her phone buzzed against the workbench, and she almost ignored it, assuming it was another potential client who could join her now 8-week waiting list. Is this Celeste Winters, the jewelry designer? The voice was crisp, professional, with just a hint of a British accent. Yes, this is Celeste. My name is Victoria Sterling. I'm the accessories editor at Metropolitan Style magazine. I was wondering if you might have time to discuss a rather exciting opportunity. Celeste nearly dropped her pliers. Metropolitan Style wasn't just any fashion magazine, was the fashion magazine. The one that launched careers and set trends. She'd bought copies religiously throughout college, dreaming of seeing her work featured among its glossy pages. Victoria had discovered Celeste's work at a small gallery opening where Linda Chin had worn the tree necklace. A photographer for the magazine had noticed it immediately and tracked down its creator. We're featuring emerging designers in our June issue. Victoria explained during their coffee meeting the following day. We'd like to include 3 of your pieces in our Hidden Gems spread. The photo shoot took place in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, with professional lighting and a model whose cheekbones could cut glass. Celeste watched from the sidelines as her handcrafted pieces were styled with designer gowns worth more than her annual rent. The experience felt surreal. It's like watching her children perform on a stage she'd never imagined they'd reach. The magazine hit newsstands on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, Celeste's phone hadn't stopped ringing. The first call came from a socialite in Manhattan who wanted matching earrings and a bracelet to go with a necklace just like the one in Metropolitan Style. Then came an inquiry from a celebrity stylist, followed by a request from a boutique owner in Beverly Hills who wanted to carry her entire collection by Friday. Celeste realized she had a problem that was actually a blessing. She couldn't possibly fulfill all these orders working alone from her studio apartment. That's when Thomas Reed entered her life like a well-dressed solution to problems she didn't even know she had. He appeared at her door on a Saturday morning carrying coffee and wearing the kind of confident smile that belonged on someone who closed $1 million deals before lunch. I represent artists, he said simply. And you, Celeste Winters, are about to become the kind of artist who needs representing. Thomas was a business manager who specialized in luxury goods and emerging designers. He'd built his reputation by taking talented creators and turning them into recognizable brands. His client list included ceramicists whose pieces sold at Bergdorf, Goodman and textile artists whose work hung in the homes of tech billionaires. You're at a crossroads, Thomas explained as they walked through a potential workshop space in a converted textile factory. You can stay small and safe, taking custom orders and building a nice little business. Or you can scale up, establish yourself as a luxury brand, and build something that outlasts us both. The space he'd found was everything Celeste had dreamed of but never dared to imagine. High ceilings with enormous windows, room for multiple workstations, and even a small gallery area where clients could view pieces and discuss commissions. The rent was 3 times what she was paying for her studio apartment, but Thomas had run the numbers. With the orders already coming in, she could afford it. The transition wasn't without its challenges. Celeste hired 2 assistants recent graduates from the jewelry design program at a local art school, who brought fresh energy and Instagram-worthy documentation of her process. She invested in professional photography, a real website, and business insurance that made her feel simultaneously grown up and terrified. her Phoenix collection, named after her ability to rise from the ashes of her relationship with Marcus, launched that fall with a private showing at the new atelier. The pieces were inspired by themes of transformation and rebirth, delicate feathers rendered in white gold, flames captured in cascading orange sapphires, and her signature Pisa necklace that looked like a phoenix in flight. Its wings created from hundreds of tiny diamonds that caught light like fire. The showing was attended by magazine editors, gallery owners, and the kind of people who collected art as casually as others collected takeout menus. Celeste wore one of her own creations, a subtle pair of earrings that caught the light when she moved, and found herself confidently discussing her design, philosophy, and artistic influences. Each piece tells a story, she explained to a journalist from the arts section of the city paper. I don't just make jewelry. I create talismans for the important moments in people's lives. Victoria Sterling arrived halfway through the evening, making her way through the crowd with the assurance of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. She examined the Phoenix collection with the keen eye of someone who could predict what would be hanging around necks at next year's Met Gala. This is museum-quality work, Victoria said, studying the Phoenix necklace under the gallery lighting. Have you thought about entering any competitions? The International Jewelry Awards are accepting submissions next month. By December, orders were backed up for 12 weeks, and Celeste had hired 2 more assistants. She'd moved into a proper apartment, still modest, but with a separate bedroom and windows that faced east so she could watch the sunrise while drinking her morning coffee. Her workbench was now a professional setup with proper ventilation and lighting that made her old coffee can tool storage look quaint in comparison. Rosa visited the new atelier on a snowy evening, bringing champagne and the kind of proud smile usually reserved for parents at graduation ceremonies. Do you remember what you told me when we first met? Rosa asked as they stood in the gallery space, surrounded by Celeste's creations displayed like the art they were. That I was just a hobbyist? You wanted to create pieces that mattered? Rosa touched the Phoenix necklace gently. Mission accomplished, Mia. Marcus is probably still wondering what happened to that quiet girl who used to organize his files. Outside, snow fell past the tall windows, but inside the atelier, everything was warm light and possibility. Celeste had built something beautiful from nothing but determination and a vision that no one else had been able to see. And this, she realized, was just the beginning. A crown fit for a queen. The letter arrived on cream-colored paper so thick it felt like fabric between Celeste's fingers. The letterhead bore an elegant coat of arms, and the handwriting was the kind taught in European finishing schools. Elena Rossi, writing on behalf of Prince Alessandro di Marco, requested a private consultation regarding a significant commission of the utmost importance and discretion. Celeste read the letter 3 times before the words fully registered. Marco family weren't just wealthy, they were Italian nobility, with a lineage stretching back to the Renaissance. Their art collection was legendary. Their charitable foundation supported museums across Europe. Prince Alessandro himself was known for his environmental initiatives and quiet philanthropy. The meeting took place at his family's New York residence, a limestone mansion on the Upper East Side that looked like it had been transplanted stone by stone from a Tuscan hillside. Elena Rossi, his assistant, greeted Celeste at the door, a woman in her 40s with sharp intelligence behind wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of efficiency that made the world's complicated problems seem manageable. His Highness will join us shortly, Elena said, leading Celeste through halls lined with Renaissance paintings and into a sun-filled sitting room. He's quite particular about craftsmanship, so please don't be offended if he asks detailed questions about your techniques. When Prince Alessandro entered the room, Celeste's first thought was that he looked nothing like the formal portraits she'd hastily Googled the night before. He was tall and lean, with dark hair slightly mussed from what Elena later mentioned. Was his morning run through Central Park? His handshake was firm. It's English perfect, but accented with the musical cadence of his native Italian. Miss Winters, thank you for coming. I studied your work extensively. The Phoenix collection is remarkable. He settled into the chair across from her with the unself-conscious grace of someone born to command attention. I have a commission that requires not just technical skill, but true artistry. My sister Francesca is to be married next spring, and I want to commission a tiara for the ceremony. The project was unlike anything Celeste had ever undertaken. The tiara needed to complement a wedding dress that had been in the family for 3 generations, incorporate diamonds from the Di Marco collection, and honor both Italian tradition. In Francesca's modern sensibilities, Alessandro showed her photographs of previous family tiaras, museum pieces that had adorned the heads of duchesses and queens. Francesca isn't interested in wearing something that makes her look like she's in costume, Alessandro explained, his eyes lighting up as he spoke about his sister. She wants something that feels authentically her, elegant but not ostentatious, traditional but not trapped in the past. Over the following weeks, Celeste found herself spending hours at the mansion, sketching designs while Alessandro provided historical context and family stories. He told her about Francesca's work as a marine biologist, her passion for protecting Mediterranean coral reefs, and her dream of having a wedding that celebrated both heritage and hope for the future. "She's the brilliant one in the family," Alessandro said one afternoon as they reviewed sketches in his private study. Books in multiple languages lined the walls. Afternoon light streamed through windows that offered glimpses of a hidden garden. I inherited the title and the responsibilities, but Francesca inherited the vision. Celeste's design began to take shape, a tiara that evoked ocean waves and coral formations, with diamonds set to catch light like sunlight filtering through water. The base would be crafted from ethically sourced platinum, and the overall design would be delicate enough to complement Francesca's features, while substantial enough to photograph beautifully in the Italian cathedral, where the ceremony would take place. As winter turned to spring, Celeste's weekly meetings with Alessandro evolved beyond the purely professional. He was genuinely curious about her creative process, asking thoughtful questions about her inspiration and techniques. Unlike Marcus, who had dismissed her work as trivial, Alessandro treated her artistry with the same respect he might show a Renaissance master. "You understand something that many people miss," he said one evening as they reviewed the final design. "True luxury isn't about expense, it's about meaning. This tiara will become part of our family's history because you've understood what matters to us." The tiara's creation required 3 months of meticulous work. Celeste collaborated with master craftsmen in Italy, overseeing every detail through video calls and photographs. When the finished piece arrived, carefully transported by courier, even Elena's professional composure cracked slightly as she lifted it. From its custom case, the tiara was everything they'd envisioned and more, a masterpiece that looked like it had been crafted from crystallized ocean foam with diamonds that seemed to dance with their own inner light. It was unmistakably a crown, but one that belonged to the modern world rather than a museum display case. Alessandro's reaction was worth every sleepless night and anxious moment. He held the tiara with reverent hands, turning it slowly to catch the light from every angle. "It's perfect," he said simply. "Francesca will feel like herself wearing this, just the most beautiful version of herself." The wedding took place in Rome that May, and Celeste was invited as an honored guest. She watched from the cathedral as Francesca walked down the aisle, the tiara catching light from ancient stained glass windows and making her look like a goddess emerging from the sea. The Italian press called it the wedding of the decade. But for Celeste, the real triumph was seeing how naturally Francesca wore the crown, as if it had been made for her specifically, which of course it had, at the reception held in the family's ancestral villa overlooking the Mediterranean. Alessandro found Celeste on a terrace where she was watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small velvet box. Inside was a ring unlike anything in Celeste's collection, a rare black diamond set in a band of her own design, one she'd sketched months earlier but never created. "You made this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had it made. From your design, Elena may have photographed your sketchbook without permission." His smile was slightly sheepish but entirely charming. "Celeste, you've given my family something irreplaceable. Now I'd like to ask you to consider giving me something even more precious, your future." The proposal wasn't a surprise exactly. Over the months of working together, Their professional collaboration had deepened into something that felt as natural as breathing. Alessandro didn't try to change her or diminish her work. Instead, he celebrated her independence and supported her dreams with the same passion he brought to his environmental causes. "I love you," he said simply, taking her hands in his. "Not because you're beautiful or talented, though you're both. I love you because you see the world the way I do, as something worth creating beauty for." As Celeste slipped the ring onto her finger, the black diamond catching the last rays of Mediterranean sunlight, she realized this was what she'd been searching for without knowing it. Not just love, but partnership. Not just acceptance, but celebration. Not just someone who wouldn't diminish her light, but someone whose own light made hers shine brighter. The Last Dance, the Metropolitan Jewelry Gala, was the kind of event that shut down blocks of Manhattan and required security. Details for the attending jewelry worth more than small countries' GDP. Held annually at the Museum of Natural History, it brought together the world's most prestigious designers, collectors, and connoisseurs under the shadow of towering dinosaur skeletons and glittering gemstone displays. This year, Celeste wasn't attending as someone's plus one or sneaking peeks at the jewelry from the sidelines. She was the evening's featured honoree, receiving the Emerging Artist Award for her Phoenix collection and the Di Marco Tiara, which had been photographed for museum exhibitions across Europe. The irony wasn't lost on her 3 years ago. She'd been organizing Marcus's calendar and listening to his dismissive comments about real art. Elena had flown in from Rome specifically for the event, bringing with her a gown that Alessandro had commissioned from an Italian designer. The dress was midnight blue silk that seemed to capture starlight in its folds, with a neckline perfectly designed to showcase the necklace Celeste had chosen for the evening, not one of her own pieces, but the very first creation from her Phoenix collection, the one that had started everything. "You look like royalty," Elena said as they stood in the museum's marble foyer, watching the city's elite arrive in a parade of limousines and designer gowns. Alessandro wanted to be here tonight, but the environmental summit in Geneva couldn't be rescheduled. "He's exactly where he should be," Celeste replied, meaning it. One of the things she loved most about Alessandro was his unwavering commitment to his causes. The man who had proposed to her with a ring worth more than most people's homes was currently arguing with world leaders about carbon emissions and ocean conservation. Thomas appeared at her elbow, splendid in a custom tuxedo and wearing the satisfied expression of a manager. His client was about to achieve everything they'd dreamed of. "Times photographer wants shots of you with the Phoenix necklace under the mineral hall lighting," he said. "And Victoria Sterling is holding court by the champagne station. She's been telling everyone who'll listen that she discovered you." The evening unfolded like a dream Celeste had never dared to have. She moved through conversations with museum curators, fashion editors, and fellow artists who spoke of her work with genuine respect and admiration. The teenage girl who had once made jewelry from craft store supplies, the young woman who had endured Marcus's condescension, felt like characters from someone else's story. Rosa had come to New York specifically for the gala, wearing a vintage dress that made her look like she'd stepped out of a 1940s film noir. She'd brought her husband Miguel and seemed to glow with pride as she introduced Celeste to old friends and colleagues. "Do you remember?" Rosa said during a quiet moment as they stood before the museum's famous Hope Diamond. "When you told me you just wanted to make things that mattered." "You mean when I was crying into cheap wine in my studio apartment?" "You weren't crying about the wine or the apartment. You were crying because someone had convinced you that your dreams were too small to matter." Rosa gestured toward the evening's crowd, where several people were wearing Celeste's jewelry and others were photographing her pieces for social media. Dreams aren't too small. People are just too scared to dream big enough. The award presentation took place in the museum's grand hall, with Celeste's Phoenix collection displayed under museum-quality lighting that made each piece look like it belonged among the institution's permanent treasures. As she walked to the podium to accept her award, the applause echoing off the soaring ceilings, she spotted a familiar face in the crowd. Marcus stood near the back of the gathering, looking exactly as he had 3 years ago, perfectly groomed, expensively dressed, and wearing the expression of someone who belonged everywhere he went. Their eyes met for a moment across the crowd, and he raised his champagne glass in what might have been a salute or acknowledgement. After the ceremony, as guests moved to the cocktail reception, Marcus approached her with the confident stride of someone who had never doubted his welcome anywhere. "Celeste," he said, his voice carrying that same tone of familiarity that had once made her feel special and later made her feel trapped. "Congratulations. I have to say, I'm not entirely surprised by your success." She studied his face, looking for the man who had once made her question her own worth. He was still handsome, still charming, still possessed of that magnetic confidence that had initially drawn her to him. But now she could see what she'd missed before the way his charm was calculated. His confidence built on diminishing others, his magnetism powered by making people feel they needed his approval. "Marcus," she said evenly, "I didn't expect to see you here. I've been following your career, actually. It's quite impressive." He gestured around the reception with proprietorial pride, as if he'd had something to do with her presence there. "I always knew you had potential. Remember how I used to encourage you to think bigger?" The rewriting of history was so audacious, it was almost admirable. Celeste could have corrected him, could have reminded him of every dismissive comment and condescending critique. Instead, she found herself feeling something unexpected: pity. "You were right about one thing," she said, her voice warm but firm. "I did need to think bigger. I needed to think so much bigger than I ever imagined possible." "I'm glad I could help," Marcus said, apparently missing the subtle correction in her words. "Listen, I'd love to catch up properly. Maybe we could have dinner while you're in town. I'm sure you have fascinating stories about your journey." Before Celeste could respond, she felt a familiar presence behind her. Thomas appeared with Elena and Victoria Sterling, creating a small protective circle around her. The conversation shifted naturally to discussions of her upcoming exhibitions and Alessandro's environmental work, and Marcus found himself gently but definitively excluded from the inner circle. Later, as the evening wound down and the last guests departed into the Manhattan night, Celeste stood in the museum's quiet halls, surrounded by the detritus of celebration empty. Champagne glasses, scattered programs, and the lingering scent of expensive perfume. Her award sat in its presentation box, solid and real in her hands. Elena joined her in the contemplative silence. "Alessandro called during the ceremony. She said he wanted me to tell you that he watched the live stream from Geneva, and he's never been prouder to be engaged to someone." Celeste touched the black diamond ring on her finger, feeling its weight and warmth. Tomorrow, she would fly back to her atelier, where orders were backed up for 4 months, and her team was working on pieces for clients around the world. Next month, she would travel to Rome to begin planning her wedding to a man who celebrated her ambitions instead of diminishing them. But tonight, she stood in a museum surrounded by treasures that had survived centuries. Holding an award that recognized her as an artist worthy of that company, the scared young woman who had once begged Marcus to take her work seriously felt like someone she'd known in another lifetime. She'd learned something important in the years since leaving him. The best revenge wasn't proving him wrong about her potential. Best revenge was discovering that his opinion had never mattered at all. She hadn't found someone better than Marcus, as he'd claimed she never would. She'd found herself, and that, it turned out, was worth more than all the diamonds in the world. As she walked through the museum's marble halls toward the exit, her heels clicking against floors that had witnessed countless celebrations of human achievement, Celeste smiled. The girl who had once made jewelry from craft store supplies had become a woman whose art would outlast them all. And somewhere in Geneva, the man who loved her exactly as she was ambitious, was talented, and finally free was probably falling. Asleep to news coverage of her triumph, already planning ways to celebrate when she returned home.